Nigeria. The year is 2019. A land of booming cities, endless promise, but also shadows that creep just beyond the streetlights. In the oil-rich state of rivers, the city of Port Harcourt beats with restless energy. By day, it is alive with commerce, markets buzzing, taxis honking, laughter spilling from bars. By night, neon lights glow across its hotels and motels. For some, these places are escapes, havens of pleasure. For others, they are death traps. Because hidden inside these dimly lit rooms, the predator stalks. His name is Gracious David West, but the world will come to remember him by another name, the Port Harcourt Strangler. Gracious was born into a world already fractured. He grew up in Buguma, a riverside town in River State, one of Nigeria's restless and poverty-stricken regions. His childhood was steeped in violence, superstition, and cultist influence. At an early age, he was drawn into Nigeria's deadly cult underworld, groups that operated like secret brotherhoods, blending ritual, loyalty, and terror. These cults offered young men identity, power, and protection, but they also demanded blood. For Gracious, this world of secrecy and violence became home. He rose within the ranks of one such cult, his reputation marked by cruelty and discipline. But beneath the surface, something darker churned. Cult killings were not enough. Ritual violence was not enough. He began to crave his own stage, his own victims. The city of Port Harcourt would become his hunting ground. It began with whispers. In late July of 2019, women, young, vulnerable, often sex workers, began vanishing from the streets and motels of Port Harcourt. At first, it was easy to dismiss. In a city where crime was common, disappearances often went unreported, but soon bodies began to surface. The victims were found in motel rooms, sprawled across beds, lifeless, their throats bearing the marks of strangulation around their necks. Survivors would later recall David West always tied a strip of cloth, a ritual almost symbolic, as if branding his victims with his signature of death. One by one, they fell. Night after night, in different motels, his hunger grew bolder, and still for weeks he roamed free. Port Harcourt lived in fear. Women refused to enter hotels. Rumors spread like wildfire. Parents locked their doors earlier. Some whispered of ritual killings, sacrifices to cult gods. Others feared a demon walked among them. But the truth was far more human. It was a man, polite, soft-spoken, even charming to those who first met him, who harbored compulsion for domination. He would lure women to hotels, often under the promise of money. Inside, he would wait for the moment when they were most vulnerable, and then with cold precision, he would strike. He strangled, not in rage, but with calm control. Watching life drain away from his victims was not an accident. It was the point. The police, at first, were slow. Cases of murdered women in Nigeria often faded into obscurity, but as bodies continued piling up, pressure mounted. Activists and citizens demanded action. Hashtags trended across social media. Protesters gathered in Port Harcourt, their voices rising. Who was killing our women? Investigators scoured motels. They examined CCTV footage. Witnesses began to come forward. And then, a break, a survivor. She told police of a man who had invited her to a motel, of how his hands turned violent, of how, in those terrifying moments, she fought him off and escaped with her life. She described him in chilling detail. Days later, the police arrested a man walking down a street in Port Harcourt. His name, Gracious David West. When they searched him, they found ropes and strips of white cloth, the same kind he had used to bind and strangle his victims. In custody, Gracious did not deny the charges. Instead, he confessed with a chilling calmness. He admitted to killing at least 15 women. Some say more. Each one lured, strangled, discarded. His motives? He claimed his cult demanded sacrifices. Others said he acted on his own impulses. An addiction to killing, a craving he could not resist. But his words revealed something deeper. This was not about money. Not about theft. He killed for pleasure, for control, for the intoxicating feeling of watching his victims slip into silence. Even hardened officers recoiled. He spoke not with shame, but with detachment, as though he were recounting an errand. The courtroom in Port Harcourt was packed. Families of the dead sat in silence, their eyes fixed on a man who had destroyed their daughters, sisters, and mothers. Gracious David West stood before the judge, dressed plainly, his face expressionless. No flicker of remorse crossed his features. Witnesses testified. Survivors recounted their horror. Police displayed the evidence. Cloth strips, testimonies, the chilling consistency of his crimes. And then the verdict came down. In October 2020, gracious David West was sentenced to death by hanging. The people of Port Harcourt celebrated. Justice at last had come. The killings that haunted their nights were over. And yet, something darker lingered. For how many weeks had he killed without consequence? How many women had vanished in Nigeria, their deaths unreported, their stories unheard? And how many more predators, cloaked by poverty, cult secrecy, and systemic failure, still walked free in the night? The execution of gracious David West closed one chapter. But it opened another question. How many more monsters hide in plain sight? How many more shadows lurk just beyond the glow of neon motel signs? Because evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles softly. Sometimes it speaks politely. Sometimes it offers comfort, only to bring death. And in 2019, in the bustling city of Port Harcourt, evil took the form of a man named Gracious David West. The Port Harcourt Strangler